One's second half is incredibly different from its first half, and my god do I love it more because of it. It is truly impressive how the entirety of this half plays its cards so thoughtfully and skillfully. It's difficult for me to articulate how well the second half of the story is told. There are so many important factors that add up to make this half as great as it is. But one of the main things that the second half was able to improve on was how each episode spends its time. As you might know if you've seen my review of the first half of 1, I found many of the episodes to have wasted a bit too much time on the second and third batch characters. For me, watching them mess around felt ultimately pointless and somewhat annoying at points. Their stories were nowhere nearly as interesting as the story of the main 5 characters. Now, something that I want to address is that after making my first video on 1, many people have told me a new way to interpret these side characters. Some people see them as a commentary on object shows. Many of them lack personality and willingly embrace the competition with very little second thought. Kind of like how some lazily written object shows start out. I don't want to call anyone out, but they do exist. Now, this connection does make sense. Many of the moments that the less interesting characters share do replicate the feeling of watching a lazily written object show. So it really does work well as a parody or a criticism of lazily written object shows. There's nothing inherently wrong with wanting to poke fun at stuff like that. But to be completely honest, I just personally don't see that as an interesting subject at all. Especially not for a web series where a completely unrelated story is going on. Yes, I know it sounds ridiculous to hear a criticism-focused YouTuber criticize how a show criticizes stuff, but hear me out. While it does make sense that these characters work as a parody of lazy object shows, it doesn't seem to help the show's actual story that much. It never feels like the show is giving commentary on lazy object shows while telling a story. It feels more like a story that occasionally gets interrupted by some commentary on object shows. And that could have maybe worked if I found the commentary interesting, but I personally don't get anything out of it. I wouldn't say that the subject of lazily written object shows is a very deep topic to dive into. There aren't a lot of esoteric intricacies to cover, so a lot of the criticism that the show seems to give feels like such low-hanging fruit to me. Lots of it seems to just boil down to character does dumb thing. Ha! Ain't that lazy and boring? And yeah, they're totally right. It is lazy and boring. You're getting your point across, but I'm trying to enjoy a story that's not lazy and boring right now. Can we just get back to that? I would much rather just be watching a story that I enjoy rather than a story that simply pokes fun at bad stories. I totally understand if you like the side characters for how they work as a commentary on lazy object shows, but I ultimately still see them as a waste of time. But that is part of the reason for why I like the second half of 1 so much more. Something that I deeply appreciated about the second half was how nearly the entire story was focused on Liam and Bryce trying to find the people on the plane, and the tighter focus on these two characters made for a much tighter narrative. Now, I wouldn't say that the first half of 1 makes the absolute most of the time it's given. With a runtime of 86 minutes, I would say that a solid amount of it consisted of side characters doing stuff that I really didn't care about, along with a couple of other tiny moments of downtime that I feel like the show could have gone without. This slow pacing worked in the show's favor for world building and development, but it also made watching the show pretty sluggish at points. However, the second half, with a slightly shorter runtime of 81 minutes, felt like it was able to get much more done with the story. Now, it still consists of slower pacing. There are some moments where the story takes its time, but whenever it slows down, there's always an important narrative reason for it to happen. For example, episode 10 was over 8 minutes long, and pretty much all that happened was Liam getting to Bryce's house and convincing him to help Liam find the people on the plane, which is something that doesn't sound like it should take up an entire episode, but Liam simply getting to Bryce's house took up almost half of it. However, it's a purposeful narrative decision. Many choices were made in this episode to elicit certain thoughts and emotions for the viewer to consider. This whole sequence is very subdued and tranquil. It reflects Liam's current headspace. This trip gives Liam some time to take a step back and just think about everything. During his journey, he's deeply contemplating everything he's been through on the plane. The soothing music and the use of long, lingering shots that let you take in the environment complements his state of reflection during the trip, especially since the environment is what reminds Liam of Charlie and Amanda, two significant aspects of his life on the plane. You can tell how the plane has left him feeling broken and how much it's been constantly gnawing at him ever since he left. Yes, this sequence goes on for a while, but everything about it is intentionally presented in order to get the correct atmosphere for what Liam as a character is experiencing. It helps you understand why he would go through all of this trouble just to get to Bryce's house. As Liam states in episode 13, Arie has taken everything from him, and he's driven by this need to avenge everyone that he's hurt. The whole trip spanned many different states over the course of multiple days, and yet all Liam is able to think about is getting his revenge, even if it means winning over the heart of someone that wants to forget about Liam's existence. And I don't know about you, but I definitely prefer that over a bunch of side characters that are just there to prove the point of object shows are lazy sometimes. And that's why I think the best decision that the second half made was focusing on Bryce and Liam. Not only did I love that the show finally took a break from these blank slates for most of the second half, I also found it deeply refreshing to have Bryce and Liam drive the story, primarily because of how their relationship was done. Now, it's kind of hard for me to talk about the relationship between these two without mentioning the amount of people that ship them, and while I'm not here to ship shame, I personally don't ship them at all. For me, what made their relationship work so well was how little chemistry they had at first. Their goals started out heavily conflicting. Everything that went down on the plane had caused Liam to seek revenge from Arie because he had taken everything from him. While for Bryce, these events had made him want to actually do something with the life that he had previously been taking for granted. This disagreement between them gives their relationship a very rocky start. Many of the moments they share are filled with general frustration that sometimes spirals into arguments. But as the second half goes on, they grow to actually tolerate each other more and more. What makes Liam and Bryce's relationship work for me is how it starts out as a relationship that's formed with annoyance, but once they realized that they needed to stick together in order to help the people on the plane, this important cause that these two work toward is what ended up allowing them to grow closer to each other. And watching this relationship blossom over time was just really cool to see. This relationship is also what made the mystery of the plane being uncovered more interesting to watch. After the first half of the show, where it really emphasized the desperate hopelessness of the plane, seeing Liam and Bryce finally discover secret after secret with each episode kept the show consistently engaging. I'm really glad that Texty was able to actually contribute to the story in the second half. It's great to finally see another important Batch 3 contestant since there aren't a whole lot of them, but unfortunately, he's really the only one that ended up doing stuff in the second half. The other boring side characters never did anything nearly as influential, and honestly, I'm fine with that since they barely got any screen time here. It kinda sucks how glad I am about how this show doesn't focus on these characters anymore since I don't want to dislike them, but since the show treats them more like comments on object shows rather than actual characters, it's evident that these guys would have just gotten in the way of the show's more story-focused second half, and they would have gotten in the way of the show's amazingly written finale. Speaking of which, I gotta talk about the show's finale, but first we gotta go over the second to last episode, You Move, I Sent. I consider this episode to be the true climax of the series. This is where we really get the full look behind the curtain of One. This is the episode that had what I found to be the most fascinating reveal of the series, and that's the reveal of the host of One, the evil god that was able to horrendously torment the people on the plane so heartlessly. We get to finally meet him. We get to take a peek inside the twisted mind of this psychotic maniac. And it turns out that he's just some giant dumbass. I found Arie's character to be so interesting, just to see a character that's so blissfully unaware of the pain that he causes. He derives no pleasure from torturing his contestants. He never went out of his way to harm them for his amusement. He just wanted to host an object show. It's clear that he's become so jaded by the years of loneliness that have completely eroded his character. He's nothing more than a husk of a person, one that doesn't understand the harm he's causing. Don't get me wrong, he has still done some inexcusable things to the contestants, but the fact that he isn't some psychotic villain is kind of underwhelming, isn't it? The events leading up to the reveal of Arie feels like we're approaching an epic climax. After Liam saved Arie's oldest contestant, Julian Beaumont, from his isolation from the world, returning him to Earth after over a decade, Liam became all the more determined to get revenge on the monster that put him there. Arie has ruined the life of Liam, as well as the lives of many other innocent people, and this horrendous injustice is what fuels Liam's drive to bring him to justice. He approaches the maniac's lair, ready for whatever dangers awaits, and he's faced with this guy. He's able to push Arie over like he's nothing. He's barely an opponent. Liam could undoubtedly kill him and get his revenge. Even if Arie isn't the horrifying antagonist we might have thought he was, Liam could still avenge the people he's wronged, right? Nope, he can't even do that, because Arie is the only reliable way for Liam to use the computer that controls the fate of the people on the plane. Without Arie, Liam is hopeless. The future of everyone on the plane is in the hands of this idiot. An idiot that is so socially incompetent that he doesn't see any issues with what he's been doing to his poor contestants. Despite how clearly upset Liam is when they first meet, Arie doesn't seem to understand why he's so upset. And even after Liam quite blatantly expresses his feelings towards Arie, he still treats Liam with a shocking amount of hospitality. He has absolutely no idea about how much pain he subjected Liam to. The only idea he has of his effect on the contestants is from a microscopic distance. Where we see a twisted game of torture and suffering, all Arie can see is his game show.
Once they were on the planet, they all got pretty scared, so the best thing I could think of is to say it was a show. They would do challenges, get eliminated, and one would win. It sounded fun, but I didn't get very far. After Calculatory was the first one eliminated, I told them the next challenge was to throw your rock as far as you can. When I dropped the first one, it crushed the whole planet and the contestants were killed. At the time, I didn't know how to respawn any of them, so it just ended the competition there. I spent the next years making sure the next competition would be better. Now, I think I'm doing a pretty good job.
Is it messed up that I find Arie to be kind of hilarious? Like, I honestly found him to be the funniest part of the entire show. I mean, obviously, his story is deeply tragic and he's done horribly awful things, but something about Arie and his brain-dead, clueless demeanor is so funny to me. Especially since it makes for an incredibly fitting contrast to the ballistic anger that Liam has for him.
End this, now!
There's 6 more eliminations left.
Are you brain dead? Send everyone back, right now!
I can't do that right now.
Why not?
There's 6 more eliminations left.
Arie is probably the show's most significant showing of dark humor. Despite everything about his horrible backstory, he still maintains this funny yet somewhat disturbing sense of innocence. This innocence is most noticeable when you think about the way he addresses others. He never addresses anyone by their actual names. People such as Liam, Oscar, and Owen, he calls them Backpack, Calculatory, and the Nail. He objectifies them, dehumanizes them, and he does it completely unaware of that fact. It's a very simple, easy to notice detail when watching the show, but it's crucial to understanding how he views the contestants. He does not understand how offensive that is, how degrading it is to be seen as and addressed as nothing more than an object in a game show. That is the tragedy of his innocence. Since he gained this innocence from his years of isolation from the world, as well as his misunderstanding of how he's hurt the contestants, both of which are factors that you could argue are out of his hands, you could say that, in a way, Arie is also just a victim of circumstance, just like everyone else. Once again, he didn't start this show because he had a knack for torturing innocents. He just wanted to do something that he thought would have been fun.
You like killing people for your own enjoyment? You like stabbing babies with giant wooden poles, Arie?
I thought it would be fun.
Now enter the final episode, self-titled. After Liam gets a burst of rage from finding out that Arie was planning to make a 3rd season for his show with the new contestants being people who knew the main 5, he unleashes this anger onto Arie, attempting to kill him through his blind rage, and he only ends up breaking his leg again, reminiscent of his life on the plane. And despite this blatant murder attempt, Arie ends up caring for Liam's wound, dragging him all the way back to his bed and building him a leg brace. And only when he's on the way back to his house with a basket of reeds to help with Liam's bedding, only then is when he dies. A quick, anticlimactic death from falling off a little waterfall bridge that he totally could have fallen off of just as easily throughout his years of solitude. Admittedly, it's pretty ridiculous that he only happens to lose his footing on it now, but it proves a point. Arie did not go out of his way to use his power as a villain. He did not have the intentions of a villain, and he did not die like a villain. He died caring for someone who absolutely hated his guts. Sure, his stupidity never allowed him to fully understand why Liam hated him so much, but he never let that misunderstanding prevent him from treating Liam with hospitality. And Liam never even got to appreciate that wholesome side of him. Once Arie died, Liam's just left unsatisfied. He knew that Arie was the one who gave him the leg brace in the bed. Who else would have done it? And yet it seems as though all Liam is left with is this seething desire for vengeance and nothing to satiate it now. Instead of an act of kindness, the leg brace that Arie made for Liam Liam just feels like a reminder of his life on the plane. And instead of appreciating Arie's final act of kindness, Liam is probably more torn up about how he never got to see him die. It's a deeply depressing way for the quote-unquote villain to be taken care of, but it fits the aesthetic of the show very well. The show's always been about characters continuing to try their best no matter what crappy situation they're put in, whether their situation is horrendously awful or just kind of awkward and inconvenient. Moments of selflessness or kind-heartedness between characters aren't glorified, but they're still effective. Moments of struggle between characters aren't dramatized, they're just shown, they're raw. And believe me, they face a lot of struggles, but that doesn't stop them from carrying on and doing what they can. And despite how sad it is to see that Liam will never get to truly understand Arie, either way, he's probably better off dead. And it's good that Liam's mind is set on something more important. Since he's left alone with no one to help him figure out Arie's computer, all Liam can do is carry on and do what he can do to free the people on the plane. And what's great about this finale is how inconclusive it is. Whatever happens next is up for interpretation. Some people have seen this ending as Liam losing all hope. He's given up on helping his friends since Arie can't help him. Some think that Liam is gonna become Arie in a way, since now he has all the power over everyone on the plane. But I personally see this much more simply. I just think Liam is gonna try to help everyone to the best of his ability, because that's what this series has always been about. I mean, if a moron like Arie could learn how to use a computer, then what's stopping Liam from learning? I don't even fully care if Liam is able to save everyone or not. After all, it's not set in stone that he'll be able to pull it off. Maybe the computer breaks. Maybe he never learns how to use it. Maybe he breaks his other leg. But to me, it doesn't really matter if he can save them or not. All that really matters to me is that he'll try his absolute best. If that's the most he can do, then it's enough. Because trying to save the people he cares about is a much more valiant cause than Arie's game show. What makes the second half work so well is its dedication to focusing on what works. Sure, there are plenty of loose ends in this show that don't get satisfying conclusions. I am sad that Charlotte never really ended up playing an important role in the story by the end, especially since episode 5 seemed to spend a lot of time building her character. Amelia didn't end up doing much either, which was pretty disappointing, and Stone's existence never truly got explained. The end of episode 14 played him up like we were gonna find out something about him, but it really just ended up being a cute little nod to his existence and nothing more, which kinda sucked. It feels as though all of the stuff that started being set up in the first half of the show was supposed to play a bigger part in the second half, but the show kinda just had to abandon it all in order to push the main story forward, which on one hand really sucks because it makes some of the first half's intriguing parts feel a bit pointless in the end, but on the other hand, to me, the story that ended up being told felt more worth telling than anything the other loose plot threads could have made. The development of Liam and Bryce's relationship, the gradual uncovering of the mystery behind the plane, literally everything about Arie, all of this stuff just worked for me. I would have liked to have seen more of Stone, Amelia, and Charlotte, but if that was what we had to give up in order to get the story that we did get, then I would say that it was worth it. As far as I'm concerned, I think one managed to actually stick the landing in the end. Even with its rocky start, and with its loose plot threads, the new ideas that the show brought to the table just ended up working so well for me. Who knows, maybe the show had the potential to be something much better, but I for one do not care. I love it just the way it is. Big thank you to my two first ever Patreon supporters, Sequoia and The Death. If you wish to follow in their magnificent footsteps, you can donate to my Patreon to get thanked in future videos and to have early access to some of my content. Absolutely no pressure. I'm still reeling from the fact that I already have 2 people that are willing to give me money for doing what I do. So once again, thank you Sequoia, thank you The Death, and thank you for watching. See you next time.